We've got a special guest on the show today. It's ActualWolf. So he's from the Pacific Northwest, a cannabis grower and singer, songwriter, musician. Uh, ActualWolf. I think usually when I'm talking to you, I call you Eric. So we'll probably mix between the two. But welcome to the show. I was wondering if you could give us a quick introduction, and then we'll start talking about cannabis, marijuana, weed, whatever you like to call it.
Yeah, man. Well, yeah, as previously stated, I'm Actual Wolf. Some people know me as Eric, as yourself, and people have known me for a long time. Some people just know me as Actual Wolf. I have been growing ganja for a really long time, and in Minnesota, where I started. Uh, Grew there for a long time, and then grew cannabis out in Oakland, and made hash out in Oakland, and um, now I live in Southern Oregon, um, in the Rogue Valley, growing cannabis and making solventless hash. And yeah, that's about all there is to say. I also am a performer, songwriter, have 7 albums out. Um, 6 of them are on a record label. My last one was self-released, and um, yeah, man, I'm just super passionate about what I do. Always have been, and I was lucky enough to turn that turn those hobbies into professions through hard work, of course.
So I
But
noticed you were making a cup of coffee. Have you got anything special that you're brewing up this morning?
I am brewing up single origin Oscar and Francisa Chacon Costa Rican coffee from Duluth Coffee in Duluth, Minnesota, brewed by Eric Faust and the gang at Duluth Coffee. I'm a big endorser of their coffee
Oh
brand.
man, Duluth coffee is the best, and I noticed that they actually I don't know if it was some kind of a coup or what, but they actually are stocking at Costco in the Twin Cities now. So kudos to them.
It's not they do such a good job. You know, that just says some things about products, Grant, and you've always been a long proponent of this. If you make really high quality and good products, people will want to buy them, and they will just support you through their natural goodwill and love of your product. And Duluth Coffee is a classic example of that. Yeah.
Yeah, so you've got a lot of ties to Minnesota. I know that what your friends or your co-involved in Stigma, is that something that you could?
Yeah. My good friends. Yeah, my good friends Josh and Tim and Cam. They are all well, Tim is the product manager and like basically overall manager, operations manager. Josh is the CEO brand consultant, and Cam is the financial guy. And they have a great company. I just did some tabling for them in Minnesota, and we had a blast. Uh, they're a great company. They started out with the 2018 Farm Bill. They started out with the hemp thing, and they just started trying to come up with great products. They brought Tim in from Oakland. He has a lot of experience with retail cannabis, and I used to be the head of purchasing at Harborside Health Center in Oakland, and they brought him in for product development. And yeah, it's just I'm so excited with what they're doing. Their edibles are great. They have great flavors, great taste. Their beverages are going well. I really like the accessibility and the variety of their beverages, and the taste is not too off-putting. So yeah, lots of pot. I'm close with the guys from Stigma. I really like their brand. there's plenty of other Minnesota brands that I enjoy, and I think Minnesota is definitely on its way to. I mean, in just a decade, a little over a decade, because I got into some legal trouble in Minnesota growing cannabis in the early 2010s, and since then they've legalized and done lots of great things. So I'm really feeling good about a lot of Minnesota brands and feeling really positive about a lot of Minnesota brands. And Stigma is definitely one of the brands I'm throwing my full support behind.
I heard that Minnesota got some stuff really right when they wrote their cannabis laws. What did they get right about it?
Oh man, that okay. Minnesota has really. I've lived on the West Coast a long time, and we have definitely messed some things up in the cannabis law. I don't want to get too into like politics, but uh, in
Hey,
certain
we love politics, so it's up to you. But like
in certain
this show
in
loves it.
certain in certain circumstances, uh, over regulation and over litigation are not the right move. And I feel like the Pacific Northwest really um, overall messed that up. They didn't. This has always been a system. Uh, I guess, for the lack of a better term, has always been set up free market, and the people have always been the decision makers. And when uh, private entities, I'm not even going to say government, and when private entities try to take over control of regulatory bodies, um, bad things happen and corruption happens, and um, the will of the people is not carried out. And I think the where Minnesota got it right, it's a long way to get here. Where Minnesota got it right is they started off right away, right out the gate, with normalizing cannabinoids. So normalizing THC, normalizing CBD, normalizing CBG and CBN from they did this by legalizing beverages and edibles in any place that serves food, which is such a big step. Probably one of the most revolutionary uh, small steps in the country towards the normalization of cannabis.
And that really
Uh,
exploded the whole beverage industry in Minnesota. I mean, you can't even hardly trip over yourself without finding, some sort of a THC Delta 8 or Delta 9 beverage. It's like very ubiquitous.
I agree, but which has always been the case um, with cannabis in the illicit market. um, the free market will sort that out. Like the 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 main thing is to allow access, and allow everybody to participate. And what that beverage law did in Minnesota and what that edible law did in Minnesota was allowed everybody to participate. So um, I think that's what we forget about in free market economics is you have to allow availability to everyone, um, so that the market, the people can truly iron it out, and the best beverages and edibles will win. The best product will come out in the end, because this is a consumer based product. It's a pleasure based product. It's the free market will win out in the end, and I think that's the greatest thing that Minnesota did. Eventually, all
Well,
those beverages and edibles will get pared down to the best of the best, and those will be which carries on to the next round of things.
Well, so this was in 2022 when Minnesota accidentally legalized some stuff, right? But there was like one lawmaker who cast a vote that was ended up being the deciding vote, and they accidentally did this. But I think it was really great for the state, as far as people that wanted to see a change in this respect. But I remember when that happened, and the person who cast that vote, they were like, "Wait a minute, no, I didn't mean to do that." And then they said, "Well, no
Yes.
take backsies. You gotta go with what you voted."
Yes, and I do enjoy that, and it does, um, again, I'd like to stay on cannabis, but on music, but that just showed a flaw. That's just smart politicking, and it showed a flaw in the system, the legislative system, in the fact that one legislator or several legislators knew that another group of legislators weren't going to look at the legislation. So that, we it was a great thing for Minnesota, and it was a fluke, and I'm glad it happened because um, Minnesotans have this amazing ability follow to uh, like courageously follow laws once they're passed. Um, and so I'm glad that happened because of uh, like, for instance, I was just back in Minnesota doing some stuff with some cannabis companies and making hashish for people and playing music and stuff. And there were several public events I went to where people were just consuming cannabis or weed or whatever you want to call it out in public. And I heard several older people say, well, that's the law now. They can do that. and
I
and
was
the
going to
other
quickly ask about that. Minnesota has always been known for having one of the great state fairs in the country. Have you been to the state fair since they legalized it and allowed people to sell and produce their own edibles?
I have not. I'm very much looking forward to that. I might be heading back this year to hang out with the guys at Stigma at the state fair, but I'm very much looking forward to going to the state fair and consuming edibles and THC beverages.
Yeah, I used to live in Minnesota for a few years, and I went to the state fair, and that was one of the things I always enjoyed was just the different amount of foods and different types of foods that they would come up with at the state fair. And I just can't imagine what people's limits would go to when they can incorporate cannabis or marijuana into it.
I mean, seems like a win-win for everybody. Other than the occasional person that's going to need a little bit of sugar, a little bit of juice to pull them out of a little THC wobblies. But it won't make them feel bad, and it won't take them out for the rest of the day. So they just got to have that extra little bit of juice on hand.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about production process a little bit. So you've
Yeah,
been making extracts without solvents, ice, water, hash, and
yeah.
whatever. Can you talk a little bit about those processes? Like, I'm super intrigued.
Yeah, man. Solventless hash. I love talking about it. Let's see, I've been making solventless hash since 2003. So almost, or a little, 21 years. And it's a wonderful process. I mean, water is a solvent, so I just like to get that out of the way in case any hash nerds are listening to that.
In case we've
This,
got some chemists that are tuning in, they're like, water's a solvent too.
well, yeah, and the the hash community is kind of like the Rush fans of cannabis, the cannabis community, so they can be a little bit particular. Water's a solvent, anyway. Yeah, so got into water's solventless hash because I was just smoking hash oil with this guy. It's kind of a similar it's kind of a similar with a lot of hash makers. Like they're smoking hash oil with this older guy, and the older guy made hash. Um, and you get super into it. It was actually in Duluth, Minnesota. I was smoking hash with this guy, and he was like, and he was like, "Oh man, yeah, you can just come over and hang out with me and smoke hash and listen to reggae records anytime." And I was like, "Cool, man." And I went over to his house a couple times, and then he was like, "I can show you how to make this." And then he had these 5-gallon bubble bags, and he showed me how to make hashish in bubble bags. It's the solventless way, which is using cold water to separate the glandular trichome head from the stalk of the trichome. And all we're trying to do is knock those glandular trichome heads off. And they are more dense than water, so they will sink to the bottom.
So wait, is
They
it as simple as you just dump a bunch of weed in water and like stir it up super fast and everything just kind of falls to the bottom? I mean, I don't mean to
no.
diminish it.
I mean, in simple terms, yes, it is that simple. But in it's essentially that simple. But obviously, like anything, it's super nuanced. So it's sorry, I'm doing a lot of ahs and ums. So it's yes, it's very actually it's very labor intensive work, and it's very difficult, and that's why not a lot of people do it. You know, it's becoming more popular via mechanization, but the original hand stir way that we all learned, which is called sieving, uh, sieving hash or sieving hash, however you want to say it. Um, that had to be done by hand, and it involves like manually lifting large volumes of water and draining bags, and it's very labor intensive. And so initially, the first people who started making hash, solventless hash like this method, which has only been around since 1999, I think, actually maybe 2000, probably 99. Um, the initial people who started making it are very like physically fit, um, tough people, and we're so very physically active, physically fit people. Like a lot of people are like into MMA and exercising and shit like that. Oops,
So,
I can't.
so,
I don't
so
know
I
if I can
imagine
swear
if
on this.
so I imagine if you're up in Duluth, like right near Lake Superior, you got like an abundance of cold water. I know you had this post that you put on your profile where you're like, Minnesota has lots of cold water. It's like, well, damn, that's true. The Lake Superior is frigid. Must be awesome
I
to use
mean,
that.
that's my favorite. I learned how to make. That's where I started making hash was in Duluth. And Duluth has amazing. Actually, most of northern Minnesota has amazingly cold water and an overabundance of water. So, I mean, I really feel like Minnesota and Michigan and Wisconsin could like lead the nation in hash production.
And the other process that you can use is what, like butane or like some kind of a.
Gas extraction, which I did briefly I actually used to do ether extraction too in the Bay, which was super dangerous.
Right, because that like but you get the fumes in the area and then that you can explode the garage or the space, right?
You can, yes. Yeah, they have what's called open blast, which is just using glass tubes and open blasting material. And then they have what's called they have closed loop extraction, which a lot of extraction companies in Minnesota use. They're these giant machines that that they're these giant machines that basically use butane gas or CO2. Those are the two main. Those are the two main gases, and they chill the product in a chamber, and and then that liquid gas is super cooled, and it takes the trichome off and essentially creates a trichome and volatile organic compound slurry, that comes out of this tube, that oozes out of this tube, and then you take that tube and you cook off the gas, in an oven, in a vacuum oven. So I prefer the solventless method. I feel like the solventless method is more ecologically sustainable. It also creates a better product, a more natural product. I made gas extract for 2 years and then felt like I was just hanging out in front of a bomb all the time and got super paranoid. And because that's essentially what I was doing. And then just went back to making solventless again. It was actually a conversation I had at the 2015 Emerald Cup with Nick Tannum, who's a hash maker, very famous hash maker. And him and I were talking about ether extract, and because I was making it at the time. And he was like, "Man, you just got to go back to solventless and just do solventless." And then he showed me some of his rosin, which was pretty new at the time, 2015. That nobody really had it. They weren't calling it rosin then; they were just calling it solventless hash oil. And so he was like, "Man, I got the solventless hash oil. Is what I'm making now."
Is that AKA dab sauce? Is that what people call it these days?
Yeah. Well, I mean, dab sauce is solvent based, but yeah. But yeah, it's dab. It's dab, for sure. Um, and
So were you competing at the 2015 Emerald Cup?
no, I was just hanging out. My friends were judges, and so we were just hanging out on some judges' passes, meeting people and smoking with folks. We had just, let me see, that year we had just grown. That year we were growing Ghost Strain Haze, or at that time we were going Ghost Strain Haze, and we were working on our Nigerian Deadhead times Mango Haze cross from the boys in Santa Rosa. And so we'd just gotten those, and we were up flexing our good ganja and hanging out with some judges and hanging out with doing the Emerald Cup thing, the business side of things. And yeah, so Nicotine was actually the one that was like, you gotta just quit making. You just gotta quit making solvents and just go back to making solventless, because that's where it's headed. And he wasn't wrong. He just was like several years off. He wasn't wrong. He was just like, let me see, that was 2015. He was just like well, no, it's 2014 now. So he was almost 10 years off. He was like 9 years off. But that takes a good vision,
Is
It's just,
is this the trend? Do you see like most people have switched over to doing it this way, or is it is
it's
this
gonna
still pretty
start.
niche?
It's super niche because it just hasn't caught on nationally, and it hasn't even really caught on state to state yet. It's not like pre-rolls or gas vape carts. It just hasn't, the culture, because there's a different culture around it, around hashish smoking, and like it's a little, like I said, a little more like Rush fans, a little more nerdy, and but it is starting to catch on. It's starting to catch on, and I think um, where uh, it's huge obstacles right now are probably production in other states. There's just not enough people producing enough volume of flour to make the amount of products that you need to make.
What amount do you? I mean, what is like the ratio? Like, how much do you need? Like 2 pounds of weed to make like two
So
ounces
let's
of hash?
say, okay, with just bubble hash, which is just solventless trichome heads, resin heads, uh, raw resin heads. It takes, like, let's say I have 3 pounds of flour, and I wash those resin heads. I'm hopefully gonna get, depending on how dry the herb is, what stage of curing it's at. At the with the proper variables, I should be getting, a QP out of those 3 pounds. I should at least be getting a quarter pound, if not more, of hashish. So let's just say I get 100 and let's just say I get 125 grams out of those 3 pounds of which I'll probably get more, but let's just say I get 125 grams. Then out of those 3 pounds and 125 grams, if I want to press that into rosin, if it is in fact a rosin pressing uh, varietal, because not all hashishes are rosin pressing varietals. Some are you don't get much oil out of, but if it's a rosin pressing varietal, that out of that 125 grams, I'm hoping to get uh, 60, like at least half back as rosin. So, so you take what, 3 pounds. So out of 1,200 grams, you get 125 of bubble hash, so that, uh, and then out of that 125 grams of bubble hash, you get 60 grams of rosin, So it's really a huge, you need a lot of volume of flour to make it financially viable.
So what happens to all that stuff that like you went from 1,200? Like, can you make
Oh,
use of it, or do you just gotta like what can you do with all that
well,
leftover?
once you process it into solventless, biomass is extremely, like, you can use it in gardens. It's an extremely effective compost. Uh, that's the main. Gas extract's a little trickier because it has residual gases in it. But so I don't, like, we used to just like lay it out and let the gas cook off, and then we used to just go bring it to the dump. So, um, but with solventless, you can just lay it out. Solventless, you can basically just put it into a compost pile. Makes amazing compost. It has plenty of nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium locked up in the biomass. That is great to add to your compost, and makes really nutrient dense compost.
Eric, if I might ask, why is it bubble hash? Where does the bubble come from?
Oh man, so the bubble hash comes from bubble bags. Comes from a guy named Marcus, the Bubble Man, from Canada, who invented the bubble bag sieving system. He he called it bubble hash because when you when you stir up cold water solventless hash, um, when the water's at the right temperature, it makes the water bubble.
Is this a picture of
Yeah.
of that process, like right here where I'm?
Yeah, right there. It makes the water bubble. There we go. Perfect. That's yep. It makes the water bubble. That's why you call it bubble hash. Yeah.
No
Do
way.
you see that, Lucas? It looks all frothy, like a mocha, like coming out of
Yeah.
your local
I,
Yeah,
Starbucks.
yeah.
I've wondered. I've heard people say bubble hash, solventless, but the Dow. So that's been a long lingering question in the back of my mind. Now, Eric, I have more questions for you. Why is there a market for hash over flour? Is it
Hash. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
well? Is it because like it's transport? Uh, I'm- I know that hash is stronger than flour, or maybe I'm wrong in that regard. Um, but does it also have to do with these vape pens? Is hash?
Um, hash is when you're talking about flour or hash, you're just talking about delivery system, right? So it's all THC. Sorry, I'm doing a dab. It's
Live on
all
the show, I love that.
it's all THC. Um, yeah, if we would have been doing video, I would have just been doing them the whole time. Um, oh man, that was a big one. So, hash is becoming popular because, well, it's always been popular in Europe, it's the most popular in Europe, but
Yeah, like Amsterdam culture has traditionally been very hash based, right? Like they're way into.
extremely, all of Holland's culture has been extremely hash based. um, and and a lot of Spanish culture has been extremely hash based as well.
And they
Uh,
press it like into really tight
they do, they
bricks.
do, they press it into bricks. Yep, yep. That's bubble hash pressed into bricks. Is what that is.
Well, and Lucas, one of
Um,
your favorite books, like The Count of Monte Cristo, wasn't he into the hashish? He was always talking about that, right?
I don't actually remember if
Oh yeah. I
oh,
mean, it's like he goes into the tent, he gets all fucked up, and like he goes into his spirit quest or whatever, and like wakes up 2 days later. He's like, "Oh, I was so fucking high."
oh, that's great. Well, in the Alexander Dumas was Moroccan,
oh yeah. Well, there you go.
there you go.
Absolutely. That's there. Very much part of that culture. A defining thing of that dictatorship. Long living monarch. That's what Morocco's known for. I've been to the hash markets there. It's amazing. um, uh, but yeah, so hash really got popular here because Americans, we love pure. We love it. We love reductions. Americans are, when it comes to ingesting pleasure chemicals, we are reduction crazy.
Yeah, that's California
Yeah,
dominant, right? Like I think all the reductions, the resins, the extracts, like that completely dominates California, doesn't it?
absolutely, absolutely, because people want pure, you know, well, I need it to be pure. I need it to be this. I need, purity is a, I mean, don't get me started on that. It's a weird kick in California, but yeah, California is really where dab culture started and where bubble hash started on the West Coast, but California was the real where it really took off. And yeah, we just want the essence of things. And so I think hashish in America is much like vaping in America, where it's just like, no, we don't want the tobacco, we just want the nicotine. And I think Americans were very much like, well, actually, it's still so new in America that like I'm daily turning people onto hashish, but slowly but surely it will eventually take over the American market too, because we just love that feeling of like I only have to take a little bit You know, I only have to take this one aspirin, and this one aspirin takes care of all my headaches and all my pains, you know. And I think the beauty of hashish and the popularity of hashish is due to of that factor of, well, we're here in America. We love the purest of the pure, you know. I don't just want to smoke this super skunk, or I don't want to just smoke this slurricane from Colorado. I want to smoke the slurricane joint. Then I want to smoke the uh, volatile organic compounds and uh, of just this plant because I like it so much. And here it is in its volatile organic compound phase. You know, it's essence. It's here are the resin heads from that plant. And I think just America is that's just the way we roll. And as hash culture becomes more of a thing, as more people get turned on to hash and dabs and you know, rosin pens, which are slowly becoming to slowly starting to take over market share. Um, we'll just get more into it because we love ease and accessibility here in America, and nothing's easier than just taking a pen out of your purse and honking on it during your son's baseball game.
No, nobody would do that, would they?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
well, there's also when I think about hashish, I also think about sort of concepts associated, hysterical concepts with it. I think of like hookah lounges, and you know the flavored gels in a hookah lounge were simulating hash in a time when it was illegal. Um,
Yes. Yes.
but also like hanging out in a living room on pillows on the floor and passing a pin around is a very different experience with with a group of friends talking about politics, talking about what have you is different than covertly taking a drag on a pin at a public setting. Do we talked a little bit about the changes in the legalities around cannabis use. Does Minneapolis have hookah lounges or hash lounges or public
They
spaces?
They don't, man. But I saw nobody when I was there. I was shocked. It felt like California in the early 2000s when I was there.
I think that's because we haven't actually tripped the line where you can do that kind of stuff yet. You can serve the beverages, you can buy some of the products, but I don't think we've actually clicked over into the full on legalization phase just yet. It's supposed to happen at the beginning of 2025, I think.
Well,
Well, I know.
I'm way into it. Like I thought it was awesome. I've never seen like I went to the Trampled by Turtles concert up at Bayfront, and I tabled with Stigma at Taste of Minnesota, and like I mean, it was really liberating and a beautiful thing to see was all those people just publicly smoking cannabis and like nobody worrying about it. I mean, we don't have that experience out here in Oregon, and we don't have that experience. I never had that. I had that experience in Oakland, but I didn't have in LA, but I didn't have it in the rest of California, where you can just publicly toke. But Minnesota, uh, I don't know if it's all the Lutherans or what, but like their ability to follow rules is amazing, and since it's legal,
it's legal, so we have to do it. It's like the Lutherans come out.
yeah, that's it. That's what I mean. Yeah, it's legal, so like people have to do it now. They're like, well, I got to do this, you know, and they're just doing it, and it's really wild to see. Like I won't say which pizza place, but like a dude from a prominent owner of a very famous pizza place was like, yeah, your dad says you're making hash, and I was like, yeah, and he said, well, you want to smoke some? And I was like, yeah, you want to smoke some right now? And he was like, yes. Yeah. And I thought, wow, this guy is pretty square. But since the law is passed, he feels like, hey, and I do love that about it. Is very uniquely Minnesotan. Is very uniquely Minnesotan to be like, well, there's a law. There's a law that's passed, and that's the law now, so people can do that, and we can't tread on them. And I love that about. I must say, I love that about Minnesota. It's pretty amazing. It was extremely amazing, actually. Yeah.
Eric, can I ask you a little bit about banking? So, like, is banking
Oh,
still a
yeah.
problem with marijuana being a Schedule 1? Like, do you still have to mostly deal in cash, or like how does
Are
it
we
work?
not? Are we not Schedule 3 now? Did that not happen?
It's not yet. Hasn't happened
Not
yet.
yet. Okay. Well, yeah. It's they've loosened up some rules with digital currency here on the West Coast, which has been great for us. But yeah, man, it's how do I put it? The U.S. has been in the bootlegging business a long time. So you have a much like this is
Grant, I don't hear Eric.
Yeah, I think we lost his audio for a second there. I wasn't sure if it was me trying to pull up a Schedule 3 thing or what. Yeah, I think we lost him. Let's see if I can get him back. But yeah, I know that as far as the plan for declassifying it or moving it from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3, that is planned for this year. So that is something that's happening at the Department of Justice, to my recollection. And I don't believe it's occurred yet, but it's still planned to have happen.
You know, Colorado, and Rusty, are marijuana bars or public spaces, smoking lounges, is that something that exists in Colorado these days, or is that
We don't really have like specific lounges for it. I was gonna speak in on it when Eric was talking about it. That's one of the things in Colorado that's really an issue is you can buy it and get marijuana basically anywhere. Like I live in a small Colorado town, and just in my small Colorado town of maybe, I don't know, 35,000, 40,000 people, we probably got 15 different marijuana shops in the town. And so it's definitely easy to get, but the problem is where do you go to smoke it? You can't smoke it in the parks. You can't smoke it in the restaurants. Most hotels don't allow you to smoke it in their hotels. And so what do you do once you actually got the product? And so what not Minnesota, what Colorado did is they started to allow a few of the motels to be cannabis friendly motels. And within that motel, you could smoke cannabis. And we have different resorts in areas. Like we have a resort right south of my area called Tico Time Resort, which is basically like an RV resort on the river. And anybody can go into that resort and openly smoke marijuana freely at that resort. And it's within the state lines. And there's lots of marijuana conventions and stuff like that there. But it's just open and free once you get within that resort's lines.
Is
can you
is it like a restaurant? Do they serve food, or is it just like you just walk in and smoke?
No, it's like an RV resort. Like they own a big, large piece of property across the river, and you can pull up with your RV, or you can pull up with your camper, and you can just hang out across the river. They got a frisbee golf course. They got like a zip line across the river. They made like a kind of like an amusement or adventure park area kind of thing along the river, and it's just openly cannabis. Like that's their angle to get people in. Is like anytime you want to come and smoke, you can come here and smoke, and we have all these different activities you can do while you're smoking.
I think we know where Cousin Eddie is these days. I ask about the notion of public places where one can engage in cannabis use with a group of people, because we hear a lot of sort of anti-drug use, we have a long history that Eric was just getting into with regards to bootlegging, prohibition of mind-altering substances in the United States, going back to the progressive era prohibition of alcohol, and its curious alignment with the women's the right for women to vote. But to me, I'm always thinking about the difference between like drug use privately and drug use with a group of people. And I think a lot of the complaints, the anxieties that maybe not the Lutherans, because the Lutherans believe in everything in moderation, but some other religious institutions are very against it, and to me, I think a lot of their associations with it come from abuse of a substance in a private matter, or from somebody who needs to be getting out more and going to that bar.
Hey, we got Eric back. So we were talking about reclassification
Currency.
of marijuana from Schedule
Currency.
1 to Schedule 3. So yeah, it hasn't happened yet. I think it's going to occur later
Yeah,
this year.
so banking. Yeah, since it's a grassroots industry, I was on my anti-corporate tirade. But since it's a grassroots industry, it's silly that they don't want um they don't want the common man to run it, even though we started the whole business and created the whole business nationally. I would say, dare I say, even globally, we created the whole business in North America between Canada, Mexico, and the United States. So they should technically let us bank. It would help the economy. I'm actually, I mean, this will surprise you none. I'm a huge supporter of full on embracing North American, or not even the U.S. national acceptance of cannabis as a national business, because we are in a jobs crisis right now in the United States as far as good paying working class jobs. And our number one export could be, or one of our greatest exports could be cannabis and hashish. And we could pump a lot of money into our small local economies if they would just let us, like the brewery system, just let us be legitimate tax-paying businesses, make our barrier to entry into the legal business easy, make accessibility to cannabis easy, and obviously make our banking situation extremely easy. It is a drag. It's not as bad here in Oregon as it was in California with the banking. California was really like into just shutting accounts down, and that sucked a whole
Did you say
bunch.
that you've used digital currencies for some of this stuff? Is that
Yeah, man, Oregon kind of lets you, as long as it's small. Oregon really doesn't frown on that at all, which is a really fucking oops. I don't know if I can swear on this podcast.
you can swear? It's fine, man.
It's a really fucking really great thing to be able to like use digital currency, and just be like, oh yeah, here, just send me a PayPal or whatever. It's been fantastic. So that's like our workaround right now, but the transaction limits have to be really small in order for that to work and not get your bank account shut down. So like, um,
Have you
and
dabbled
then
into crypto at all for that, or?
I knew you were going there.
Right on. Well, with this show has a strong love for crypto, so anytime we
I
can weasel it
I
in, we'll try.
understand. Um, there was a hot minute where people were taking crypto. Um, but I think I still know a few people who do it. Um, but it's really like, you know, I I really don't think there is a better system than the good old as far as if you want to run a society and keep track of things in that society, you first of all you have to make everything fair as far as uh, bringing in taxable revenue to run that society. That being said, uh, in a perfect world, cash would be amazing. In a perfect society, cash and bartered goods would be amazing. Um, but we are not in a perfect society, and the world is full of greedy animals. So we can't have nice things that we want, like cash is king society, because people abuse that system. Do I think crypto is a viable form of currency? I think it will be. Um, it seems to be because hyper capitalists love it. So I'm not calling y'all hyper capitalists, but I know that my buddy just purchased a bunch of real estate, um, and part of his asset calculation, they took into heavy account of his cryptocurrency portfolio. So, being that real estate people are hyper capitalists, I know that cryptocurrency is a favorite of the hyper capitalists. So it must be, we must be trying to do something with it. I know you guys love it, and I know a lot of my friends love it. So, um, but for me, man, cash is king. I wish we were all cash barter society. I guess I'm just an old hippie like that, but
Hey,
I
cash is
wish we.
awesome, man. We on this show are big fans of cash. It's just when you're
Uh,
dealing with international or even
yeah,
national trade, it's like can't be mailing envelopes full of cash through the mail, or maybe you can. Who knows?
you can only mail so much, but we don't need to talk about that on a podcast. Yeah, it's
That's
the post office is hip to that. They've been hip to that for a long time. Um, but yeah, cash is king. We love cash. I
Well, the
feel like
post office is still the main delivery mechanism for gold and silver too. So the post office is no stranger to what do they call that? I think it's certified mail. Is that what it is with it?
yeah, yeah. Post office is funny like that. They're fully aware of what they participate in. The U.S. Postal Service. It's an amazing business. One of my favorite businesses in the United States, if not my favorite business in the United States. Um, it's
they're one of the only the only government entities that's actually set up in the Constitution as a post office. Um, Eric, earlier you said you mentioned anti-corporate, and I think that's
yeah.
something that the cannabis industry needs to be worried and thinking about. Are you familiar with the moves that the tobacco industry tried to make in the late 70s, early 80s, with the anticipation that marijuana, cannabis would be legalized 30 years ago?
I'm not aware of that, but I would not. I mean, America doesn't. the more you learn about America, the less American history surprises you. Yeah.
Well, I guess the main thing that they did then, I don't know if you smoke tobacco at all.
I don't. I've never been into that situation. Yeah.
Well, sort of the arc of the improvement of their product had been a finer grind, more sophisticated Newports and Camel 100s, these cigarettes in place of twisted tobacco and snuff and all these methods of delivery. And what they were preparing for, was smoking flower and growing cannabis, and they were ramped up to do that. So they introduced the papers and the roll your own bag, because
Ah.
they were looking at the cannabis culture that existed in the United States in the 60s and the 70s, where people were rolling doobies, and so they began to model the practices of to groom, I guess is the word, the practices of tobacco users to be ready to switch over and to fill their rolled cigarette with something else, should they have a hankering for that.
That is extremely interesting. That makes a ton of sense. I am quite surprised the tobacco industry hasn't jumped on board. It seems like they're going to go the way of the vape. I was talking to my friend in South Carolina, and seems like they're going to go the way of the vapes for the tobacco companies, which makes a lot of sense with regarding cannabis. But I always thought they would just, I always pictured that whole like Marlboro green 100s type thing, and it never really came to fruition. And I'm glad that cannabis, to an extent, is still a run by the people. It's still to an extent run by the people. I think a lot of corporate interference came about when California repealed Prop 215 and went to full legalization in 2017. I think that messed up the market a lot. I think that allowed corporations to enter into the cannabis market where they were previously getting shut out. And I think Oregon allowing the Oregon Liquor Commission to control their cannabis board and their cannabis program also is corporate interference. I'm against. This business was started by people and for people, and I'm just totally against any sort of like. I want everybody to make money, but I'm against like any sort of like big business operating entity that already has tons of money making money, like let the people who have been struggling and doing this when it was illegal and smuggling drugs across the country and smuggling drugs over the border, and let all the patriots, much like this. I mean, this is a weird statement, obviously, knowing what we know about history, but much like the founding of this country, let's let the patriots control the businesses that they started. Like they let those rich, wealthy landowners in Virginia and in Virginia and the Carolinas and Maryland start a country and run it. Let the cannabis people run the cannabis business. Like I don't need some guy with a lot of money who wants to open up 3 football field size grows and grow shitty mid cannabis flower and make it into shitty vape pens. I don't need that guy in business. That guy has plenty of opportunities in America to make money other places. Like, this business was started by heads, is run by heads. Let us run the business, you know. I think that's really where my whole like anti-corporate stance on cannabis comes into play, you know.
Well,
And
and
we
didn't Minnesota get some stuff right that sort of tends to push it more in the direction of heads running the store?
absolutely limited size of farms. They're going to limit um, they're going to limit licensing to, I think, in-state people, and they're going to limit the size of farms so that everybody can participate. And that was really the, oh man, this is when I start to sound like I'm on Joe Rogan's podcast, but I'm not. We should let people who, we should let the people start, like, the idea of a free market is to let the people start the businesses, and then the ones that fail, you know, so that the best businesses rise to the top or become absorbed by the best run businesses, you know? And like, that's the way our system is set up. So where Minnesota definitely is leading nationally is that they set it up so that everybody can enter into the business, and then the market will sort that out, you know. The best thing about California's first law, Proposition 215, that they passed in 2001, everyone could enter the business. If you were a person that grew 10,000 plants, you were competing with a dude who grew 50 plants in his garage. And that dude that grew 50 plants was probably outgrowing you with 10,000 plants and getting his stuff in the clubs, you know, because quality was valued over profit. And I think where Minnesota's law is set, Minnesota seems to be setting up a system where quality and free market economics can coexist. Um, Quality and free market economics can coexist uh, as long as there's an absence of greedy people. You know, they can exist within the frame of a team, and you don't have to think the same way, and you don't have to feel the same way to know that quality is better than profit. You know, when it comes to things you're putting in your body, quality is better than profit. Quality over profit. Yeah.
Eric, you said you drew a fist from me when you said we need to let businesses fail, because that is the actual definition of capitalism. And if we're to pursue free markets, then we have to divorce politicians from this notion of they need to be the saviors of some businesses. You know, earlier you also
I mean, look what it's done to our farm systems. I mean, it's completely ruined destroyed our agriculture system.
100%,
Yeah.
and
So it's like our food delivery system is awful. It's one of the most advanced food delivery systems in the world, but it's delivering garbage food because we are not we are not our government is not incentivized enough to help people create different revenue streams and different areas to make money when the businesses they've set them up in have failed, you know.
well, I think
Like,
we
yeah.
also have politicians who maybe are nefarious, or maybe are just amateurs, because we're in a democracy, and that's a nice thing in changing out bureaucrats. But you know, you mentioned earlier that in a stable and law-abiding society, we need to be able to track some things. We need to have good accounting to tell a good story. But then also that you prefer cash, and I think part of the nuance there is we need to hold the producers to an accountable good story, but the purchasers should have this notion of cash, should have a notion of anonymity as to what their consumption is. And
Absolutely.
when you dropped out too, I mentioned prohibition, and the success of prohibition was tied to suffrage for women in the progressive era. And it would seem to me that the cannabis movement and crypto also could forge a holy alliance, because crypto can provide that sort of nuance in payment systems, in monetary systems, in tracking the business, and yet providing anonymity or some measure of anonymity for the purchasers. Do you see any cannabis growers or anyone in the cannabis industry that you've come into contact with who are seeking I don't know, solutions in crypto in whatever form that may be for their business models?
Yeah, I don't, like I was just saying to Grant, like I don't think I think crypto's great. I know some folks who definitely take it and have had, and it's through sheer will of the people, it's starting to make an impact, and not just on not on uh, a continental scale, but on a global scale. And I definitely see it becoming a mainstream form of currency amongst the people. I also, like, back in the day, I've seen it abused, but I guess all currency is abused by nefarious folks. But it's my only issue with crypto is, like, I I don't believe in I believe that I don't believe in the, like, in a perfect society where we're all well educated and we all have the same educational level and the same values globally, and we all want the same things, cryptocurrency would work flawlessly. Um and I welcome it as an adopted currency style. However, my problems with it are that we're flawed as a species. We're a flawed herd of animals, and we're flawed as a species, and we value sensationalism over practicality, and we like bright, shiny things. And that does not bode well for us economically in the crypto market because of its current stability. I understand that it's becoming more stable, and that's about all I understand about it, because I'm not a financial expert. I just make cash. But I think it's a good. I don't want to see. I guess what I'm saying is I don't want to see that fluctuation. I want my currency markets to be stable, and I don't want to see that fluctuation in my currency markets.
I hear you on that. I think
Yeah,
that's pretty.
and yeah, I just
Yeah,
need it to be more stable, and
it's
that's where I'm at.
spoken like a businessman, man. It's like I don't
Yeah.
want to write a contract and then find out that I'm on the wrong side of that contract, either the upside or the downside. It's just like I just want to know that, like, my prices are stable the way my inputs have stable prices, and I just want stability. That's what's the hallmark of a strong society, is when you know what things are going to cost. Therefore, you have a price that you can communicate to your customers, and everything's just flowing really well. But if things are ripping
Yeah.
up or down, that's not good for anybody.
But well, it's fine for the people with a lot to lose, but it's not fine for the majority of people. And what I would love to see, which would help bring stability to the crypto market, because it would bring stability to the financial markets in general, is a cleaner, more efficient, better taxation system, so that we can keep, so that we can essentially put more value back into the working class and the middle class, and take a little bit of their burden off, so that they can make a little bit more money. The working class and the middle class can make a little bit more money, and then as the working class and middle class make more money, as we know, they spend more money. And so then I feel like if we bring stability to the working class and the middle class, then we can have more time, and then we can have more time to bring stability to this crypto market. We can have more, because people, the base of producers, the people who actually produce the products, not the people who own the means of production, but the people who produce the products, will then have more capital, will not be as stressed out, and will be able to branch out with that capital, and branch out with those assets. And I feel like that has a better chance of bringing stability to the crypto market, is by just getting more money, hard assets in working people's hands, so that we have more money to fuck around with.
Well, you mentioned, or maybe it was Grant who mentioned the limits. No, it was you, Eric, of the limits on farm sizes and I'm not sure if it was Minnesota or Oregon, but it would seem to me that was part of the history of America. The Homestead Act, even the Articles of Confederation get very much into the dispensation of property and forbid leaving it to your heirs. I can't remember what the word is.
Inheritance.
Not inheritance, primogeniture. They forbid primogeniture, because they agree with inheritance, but they said that if you have issue, that the Articles of Confederation said if you have issue children, then your property must be split evenly amongst them. You can't select one child and leave everything to the one child and set up a noble class in that way. And we hear about like the conservative, the right, or even Democrats in the past. Everyone in America, part of the definition of America is the freedom to go out and buy more property. But perhaps what we should be interested in is giving citizens actual access to capital, and be opening up the accounting, the money, the currency, the finances, to let them create corporations, to incorporate themselves, to create LLCs, partnerships, or whatever sort of taxing structure that might look like. But in the place where we are now, we have allowed individuals and corporations, whatever groups of people in whatever form that might look like. It might be an LLC and a hidden group of people, but we've allowed them to buy up massive tracts of property.
Yes.
And you talk about fixing agriculture. Perhaps cannabis will open us up to a conversation about how to give economic freedom back to the citizens of America without allowing the means of production, the land and the property, to be consumed by behemoth institutions. Blackstone,
Oh my God, Bill Gates, Blackstone. Yeah. It's all I know is that a free market economic system, I've only seen it work one time, and that was in California and it was just in the cannabis industry. But it was like,
And when you say a free market in California, was that when it was illegal, or was that a
no,
legalized free market?
that was legalized. There was the Prop 215, medical cannabis. It was
Well,
legal from 2001 to 2017.
would one
And
other instance of that be the like the brew industry in Minnesota when that
in
got opened?
Minnesota, there we go. That's
Yeah.
another perfect example. It's sorting itself out currently. Yeah, the brewery industry is sorting itself out. Everybody got to have a brewery. The biggest and best survived, or the best survived, because some aren't necessarily the biggest, but some are just make good beer. And that is now, like, in the next few years, it'll sort itself out. California system was the exact same. Um, like I said, the beauty of it was that dispensaries had purchasing departments, so they had a group of professionals that consumed and tested the products. Then, if they liked the products, they sent the products out for lab testing. So they had all these really great um, retail level checks and balances. You know, and then you got your money released to you the second half of you got paid half up front, and then the second half of your money got released to you if it passed testing. So it was essentially like a 2 week hold, but you went through those checks and balances at the retail level, at the consumer level, then you went to them at the lab level. And anyone, you could have been a guy in your house that only grows 2 pounds of cannabis of harvest, but you could have had a brand name in California that people would have got behind and got they just the money was there. It was anyone can compete and only the best win, you know. And I think and that happened in Minnesota as well. I think it's happening with THC beverages and edibles currently in Minnesota. I think with consumables, with food, I think food should go that route. Like Americans should be trying to deliver us all the best food for the lowest cost, but we do not. All we want is the lowest cost, you know. But like really our priority should be, since it's consumable and it's going into Americans' bodies, it should be the best food for the least amount of cost, you know. And we just aren't set up like that. We're set up for big person with all the money takes all the stuff. Yeah, and that's not an equal playing field. That's an oligarchy.
Well,
Yeah,
there's also sort of when it comes to agriculture, there's when you're growing wheat or some sort of staple for diet, um, the producers of it love to invoke the narrative of food scarcity because
yeah,
because it can be stored, and agricultural products that are about the experience can be threatening to landowners, agricultural producers who are interested in growing crops that they can manipulate the price with by
yeah.
invoking narratives of a dearth in the future.
The egg
So
producers of America just got busted for it.
yeah, yeah.
The egg producers of America fixed egg prices during the pandemic and fixed egg prices coming out of the pandemic, and they just got busted for it. And corn, I think when we incentivize, I mean, you know, we grew up with that weird communist, those weird like collectivist communist myths spread by our baby boomer propaganda that were like, oh, and the farmer, if you make everybody grow one thing, the farmers get lazy and they have no incentive to do a good job, you know? Well, that's not totally wrong. But it also happens with like when you incentivize farmers to grow all one crop via hyper capitalism and grow these crops to surplus, to world surplus levels, so that you can then manipulate and fix prices. You are then also it's like, so it's not just a communist, it's an economic structure. It's an economic oh, what would you say? An economic tragedy. That you can do the same thing to a guy in Iowa who's growing corn as you can to a racist, classist stereotype of a Russian immigrant working, or a Russian farmer working on a pogrom, in Ukraine. You you can It's the same thing. Two different economic systems, two exploited systems, same result. So
Well,
like,
think
yeah.
also to the quote unquote Great Depression. The Great Depression was uh, there wasn't a lack of food. There wasn't a lack of wheat. There wasn't a lack of sheep or cattle. There were too many of them. America had become too good at producing food, and so prices collapsed. The depression was the lack of amount of money for people to believe that they could go out and afford these things. So it's interesting, the responses that we came up with coming out of that was to create lots and lots more money, and give the government the notion of crop insurance so they could moderate the supply, so that they could control the supply, and incentivize us to grow lots and lots of corn, so they could experiment with things like biofuels and whatnot. So
Well, they
uh,
also had to hire a guy to come in and teach all the farmers in the middle of the United States new farming practices so they wouldn't destroy and deplete the land, as well. The U.S. government had to hire somebody to do that, during the Depression as well, because of the Dust Bowl was a once in every 500-year event, and humans just happened to run up against that historically we just bumped up against it.
I grew up in the middle of. There's a book that won the National Book Award, The Worst Hard Time by Timothy Egan. I don't know if you ever read it, but he triangulates the Dust Bowl as from Dalhart, Texas, to Guyman, Oklahoma, to Borger, Texas, and I lived right in the center of it growing up. So you're absolutely right about that. But part of the problem that I see there is this notion of introduced crops also, and this notion of scarcity and efficiency, because we plowed up any number of native foods that could have been appetizing, and given us a broader and more balanced diet than relying on corn and wheat, processed and reprocessed into any number of other things. Maybe we should add mushrooms and meat into
Our
that.
history will, I mean, what we're celebrating our 250 years coming up here, as a country. Um, History will look back on us in the U.S. Our so many failures agriculturally and with resources, with natural resources. Uh, so many businesses that could have been sustainable forever became finite due to our inability to listen to our native populations who lived on this land for thousands of years before us. Yes,
Well,
yeah, yeah.
Well, question for you, because you also talked about earlier in moving from butane extraction for creating hash to going to
Water.
butter or bubble. Um, part of the narrative in America too is that people don't want to work. You have to pay them to work. But do you enjoy um, do you enjoy making hash? Do you enjoy growing
Well,
weed?
I do this because I've, you know, it's beyond currency for me. It's much like my music. I'd be doing this if I didn't, you know, I don't make a ton of money now off it. We are a small operation and we make enough money to pay our bills, and we're hoping to soon make enough money to like pay our bills and put a little bit of money in the bank. But I'd be doing this anyway. I love doing this. It's a passion. It's uh, you know, we
Eric, along that line, do you want to plug your weed sales? Is there a way for people to get in touch with you? Like what? I mean, we don't mind. Like you can go ahead, just
Oh yeah, I
shamelessly
mean, you can
spill
just
it,
hit
dude.
me up on the internet, or you can just hit me up on Instagram, and we can make a connection there. Uh, let me know.
Or right here, I got it on the screen again. Actual
Actual
Wolf.
Wolf Music, yep, or Actual Wolf on Twitter or X. I think it's going back to Twitter now. I think Elon had a poll. I think it's going back.
No way, I didn't
Um,
hear that. Really? It's not X anymore. It's go
well,
back to Twitter.
He had a poll, and changing it back to Twitter won. So he's usually pretty good about, as he's a simpleton in many ways, and that's one of the ways, and I do appreciate that. Yeah, but hopefully, but yeah, on X, Actual Wolf, on X, Actual Wolf Music on Instagram, um, and just yeah, hit me up, and we can start a dialogue, and we can suss it out and figure out. Like you can also order Actual Wolf melts through my friend Matt at Earthly Delights Organic Gold. I know that's a big word. That's a big thing there. Earthly Delights Organic Gold on Instagram. Uh, he sells all my rosin, Actual Wolf melts. You can hit him up as well. I'd also like to give a few shout outs to some products that we use. We use J Plant Speakers, Quilaha extract powder. It's a plant-based wetting agent. We use it. The Q60 for our smaller stuff, and the Q20 Ag. That's J Plant Speaker on Instagram. Check him out. The Quilaha extract powder. It's all organic. We use it for everything. We also use King's Mix from Royal Gold Soils from um, Blue Lake, California, Northern California. Shout out State of Jefferson. We use their soil, and then we use Living Soil Amendment, Earthly Delights Organic Gold from Mount Angel, Oregon, formerly from Oakland, California. We love his products. He has a living soil amendment that you add to your soil to biologically activate it, and so that you can reuse it, and it becomes living soil. And it's a fantastic medium to grow in. So just giving those guys a shout out as well. Now that I'm talking products, yeah.
Eric, could we
Um,
hear? Could you tell us a bit about your music?
oh yeah, my music. Yeah. Sure. Yes. I'm currently doing a fundraiser on GoFundMe to fund my next three albums. I've already started recording the covers album, so some of that GoFundMe has come through. It's Actual Wolf Music GoFundMe. You can go find it on my social medias. Um, it's country and rock and roll music, and um, it's I have 7 albums out. Uh, several of which are on Chaperone Records. I think five are on Chaperone Records, which is now shut down tragically. That's okay, but I still have the records. So, and then one is on Red House Records from Nashville, Tennessee. Label started by the famous folk singer from Iowa, Greg Brown. And that is called Faded Days. And so you can get that album at redhouserecords.com. Faded Days. It's my first record to go. It's my first record with a song to go over 1 million streams. I'm the first artist for Red House Records that's living to go over 1 million streams and not tour. So that's a nice accomplishment. And then my latest record, Hometown Hero, is available on my Bandcamp, which is actualwolf.bandcamp.com. You can go listen to the tunes there. It's currently out of print, but we will be getting the next records made, the next CDs printed for that shortly, for Hometown Hero, probably in the next 2 or 3 months. And I'd like to give a shout out to, oh my gosh, what's their name? I'm now blanking out. They're from Minneapolis. They do all my CD stuff. Oh gosh, Copycats Media. Whew. Give a shout out to Copycats Media, Brad at Copycats Media. They do all my CD printing and stuff like that. So I'd like to also give them a shout out as well.
And do you tour or?
I play a lot in I tour in the Pacific Northwest and the West Coast. I'm gonna start doing more touring again in Minnesota, because I'm gonna be back there doing a lot of work. I'm originally from Minnesota. Um, I'm going to be doing a lot of work there, so I'll be back touring with my band and solo, and I'll be tabling at a lot of events in Minnesota. Hopefully, doing some judging coming up in Minnesota and Illinois. Haven't forgot about the people in Chicago. I know you're our biggest market, and we need to play in Chicago more. And I'm super sorry that we have not played in Chicago more. And we love you so much, Chicago, and we will play there more.
And did you say that you were your country? That what sort of genre does your music?
Oh, like country and rock and roll. Like it's really more rock and roll. Like in the classic sense of rock and roll. Like before they resegregated rock and roll, which I don't have enough time to talk to you about the resegregation of rock and roll, but it was a thing that happened in the late 50s. Yep. But yeah, more rock and roll in the classic sense, songs about
Wait a second. You piqued my interest, and I've never heard that before. What is the resegregation of rock and roll?
Oh my God. Okay, so I'm going to plug another podcast on this podcast. It's called The History of Rock and Roll in 500 Songs. Listen to it. The first season, you will learn about the resegregation of rock and roll. So I'll just give you a quick overview, and then I do have to wrap it up. But so when rock and roll first started in like the early to mid 50s, it was the combination of a white form of music called the hillbilly boogie, jump swing, which is the jazz, and then rhythm and blues music from the black and gospel tradition, and they all came together and they made rock and roll. So there was no so when rock and roll came around, there's just the rock and roll chart and the pop chart and the jazz chart. They eliminated, there was no country music chart, there was no rhythm and blues chart. There was just gospel, jazz, rock and roll, and pop. And then so they basically eliminated the and so then as rock and roll gained in popularity, some of those songs from the rock and roll chart crossed over to the pop chart. And so that meant that national radio stations everywhere had to play those songs because they were hits. Well, the southern DJs and the southern record distributors were starting to find out that some of those pop crossover songs were by black artists. And so they got upset and said, we're not going to play these records on the radio. We're not going to distribute these records. So Billboard recreated they created more album charts to break up rock and roll into country and western, rhythm and blues, rock and roll. So they resegregated. It was a universal art form, beloved by all by all ethnicities of Americans. But due to racism of record distributors and radio DJs in the South, Billboard resegregated the charts. Yeah, that's what happened.
You know, you mentioned
So they took this great utopian, they took this amazing utopian idea of rock and roll, like rock and roll, the great uniter, it's gonna break down barriers and the teenage rebellion, and they took it and they're just like, nope, we're putting a stop to this bullshit. And they just resegregated the whole thing. Yeah.
Well, yeah. As I think about that, I think about the unifying the unifying aspects of pleasure and music, of rhythm. You said hillbilly earlier. Hillbilly was a term originally for Appalachian people who were friendly to black people, and even cowboy. Cowboy was the name for a black person who worked cattle. A white person who worked cattle was called a cowhand. And
a Mexican person was called a
vaquero.
A buckaroo, vaquero.
That's where the term buckaroo. I didn't know.
That's where the term buckaroo comes from. It's vaquero, saying white people trying to say vaquero. Really?
No way. I didn't realize that was.
That's where buckaroo comes from.
Well,
all right. Well, we said we got to roll out, right? So Eric, ActualWolf.
We do before we get off. Before I keep doing dabs and just ruin my whole morning. Yeah.
Right on, brother. Well, this is awesome having you on. Great show. Loved running down kind of everything with respect to cannabis. Wish we could have gotten a little bit more into the music side of things. Maybe you can come back and tell us more about that on a later show.
Yeah, I should do that. I should come back and tell you guys about it on a later show. And we should have a show where I just get weird with you guys too.
Hey, I love it.
And we talk about weird stuff.
Let's do it. Sounds great.
All right. Okay. I know you guys like talking about weird stuff. Yeah.
Amen to that. Well, Eric, thanks for coming on.
Hey, thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it.
All right. We'll see you.
Yep. Bye.